we're not there to limit
That's a good point.
anyone. It's not our role to tell someone what they can or cannot have at their home. Ultimately, the decision lies with the client.
Yeah.
It's just making that decision in an informed way. And if we go back to our £1 million example, if the client really wants those gold tabs or statements there, and they accept that the budget will go up to 1.2 million and they're happy with that, that's fine.
Yeah.
You revise the brief, you revise the budget, and you move on.
Hi, Bart.
Hi, Tina.
Right, so today we want to talk about something more in your domain than mine. I'd like to think so. And really covering sort of cost control and how you manage it through the build. So let's kick off really talking about setting the budget. Where do you start with that? Who sets the budget?
Well, it will always be the client,
Okay.
right? I mean, every project that exists, regardless whether it's a residential client or developer or company, business, whatever, it has a business case, and there are budget constraints. Even when we work on really expensive projects, there's always constraints.
It's not a never-ending money pit,
No.
right?
It's not a never-ending money pit, and sometimes people have more money. It doesn't have to be whatever I've got, I can spend.
Yeah.
But sometimes they just don't want to, and I understand it. So the budget comes from the client, and we've got another episode on how to start your project with the brief and the budget. So we covered that there. But today, we when we talked about it earlier, we thought it would be interesting to discuss what happens once you've got your initial budget, and then how that budget follows the project, and how it is also what are the options for controlling the cost throughout the project. So,
and I think at this stage it's probably really important to say that the budget on day one necessarily isn't the same one that sticks with you through.
It rarely is.
But that's what I'm saying. But people so often get fixated on the first figure they hear.
Yeah.
But the reality is very different. And today's a little bit about navigating that whole journey with that day one figure versus where you actually end up and how you end up there.
Well, yes, and also it's about how to do it in a controllable way.
Yeah.
So when your budget changes, either way, unfortunately, more often up than down, as we know, for different reasons. But how those changes are done consciously, as opposed to just running into
a brick wall.
Brick wall. Yeah.
So, how do we sort of kick off whether a budget is right? What allows us for that to verify? Obviously, we engage a QS or somebody who's managing quality and cost control in that sense. But often people just go to their builder, right?
Yeah, possibly. I think there are a few ways. So if we say that the step one will be starting with what we want to or can afford to spend or willing to, we start with that, and then you've got an idea of what you actually want to achieve, and then there are several ways of getting that initial budget reconfirmed. Going especially on smaller projects, I noticed that going to a builder is quite popular. It's not necessarily wrong, especially for small jobs, but the more complex it becomes, even when it gets to 250,000 or thereabouts, there is a risk involved.
Yeah.
I think, as I mentioned in other episodes, the builder's job is to get the project.
Yeah.
And to make money on it. So that's the main objective. It's not necessarily to provide you the most robust and all-inclusive advice. Saying that there are plenty of very, very reputable builders and with high integrity who will tell you.
There'll be a line of people asking you who they are, to be fair. But
I know a few. I know a few, but there are plenty that will actually be very honest about what they think that it will cost. The trouble is that they usually work with numbers or with the prices that they had on projects as they think yours will be designed or will be executed. And at the early stages, that idea of what it will be at the end is quite vague. Yeah. So they're using a quite precise number. Last time we did one like that was 750,000. So yours be about that, right? Yeah. Because we might have said one double extension and the loft and some internal works, for example, right? And it could be that, but they very often usually won't ask the questions like, okay, then what do you want? Glazed roof? Do you want structural glazing? Have you been thinking about this? Have you been thinking about something else? It's not their job. Yeah. And also when they think about how much a brick wall, their rates are for building a brick wall, to certain specification. Yeah. When we talk about cost planning, or when professionals talk about cost planning, it's a little bit more involved, and there are different rates that are used. So we use rates that already include allowance for variability in that design, and for variability in solutions that may be chosen. Yeah. So. On that basis, I think one needs to be careful with builders, right?
Yeah, I always find it's a little bit of a testing the market type approach, and then the reality when you then, somebody then develops a design based on a builder's price. Suddenly, when you go out to tender and then get the prices back, the same builder is often double the initial cost, and then suddenly that's a shock. Yeah, for a client, as to kind of like, oh, hold on a minute, he told me this 6 months ago, and I'm like, yeah, but he based it on very little actual design information, and I think that's the trap that you're saying that you can often end up falling into.
Yeah, and you've got all the conversation that but we didn't know that you wanted marble. Yeah, we didn't know you wanted to include the kitchen in that. Yeah. We don't do kitchens, and you've got all those conversations.
And then you've got to find the magic money pot to bridge the gap, right, at that stage.
Well, hopefully you wouldn't get to that stage with just that initial advice, and I think also it doesn't need to be a quantity surveyor or cost consultant. Yeah. I know plenty of architects who got very good feel for what it's likely to end up as, and it is. At that initial stage, sort of feasibility. Yeah. So when you're exploring ideas, it is about that ballpark figure, right? So say if you've got $1 million to spend, is it feasible to do it for $1 million? And if if we did a more thorough exercise at that point, and it came up to 1.2. $1 million is possible because we're working with such vague data that with careful design, it may as well be $1 million. Sharpen the
pencil a little bit as you go, right?
Yeah. But then you've got to be a little bit more careful with the design.
Yeah, and in terms of that, though, because I think often, and you mentioned, so some architects will come and they have a good sense of how much sort of work that they do regularly costs, so they will give you that. And often the outlook that I get on the other side is, but that's not what they tell me on the TV. And you've kind of got this disparity between, I'm actually giving you really credible advice here. Yeah. It is actually going to cost this based on what I know, and I've been doing it for this long in this market regularly. And, we've done something similar down the way, and we've got something like that on site. Yeah. And I'm sure you're in exactly similar situation, and you give a figure to somebody and they will almost make you look like you're stupid because you're giving them something that they perhaps don't want to hear.
Well, they don't want to hear it often.
But it's actually grounded in a lot of reality. And it's kind of, how do you tackle that kind of, but I saw it on, Grand Designs or whatever property TV program it is, that often those budgets are kind of being batted around that, £1,000 a square meter. I'm like, I cannot remember the last time we built anything for that price. And yet you're like, And which country was that exactly? Where were they building?
Well, I'll be honest with you. It's been a while since I watched Grand Designs. I like the program, by the way.
I don't. So we're clear on that.
Well, I do like the program, but I think, was it Kevin MacLeod? Is that? Yeah, I think some of his comments on budget were very reasonable. So nothing against Grand Designs or whatnot. My first question would be, when was the project recorded?
Yeah.
Because the other thing that I hear very often is, this when we do cost assessment, cost plan, and clients come back and say, "There's no way it's going to cost me so much," and it's like, "Well, I can build it for much less than that." And I say, "Okay, then, well, what are you basing your opinion on?"
Yeah.
We've done a similar project.
And it's like 5 years ago.
Recently, right? And one was recently, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? And unfortunately for many people, time flies.
Yeah.
And 5 years doesn't seem like that long ago. But ONS actually states that it was 26% construction inflation since 2021, I think. I may be wrong in that. If so,
we'll correct it in the notes.
Correct it in the notes. But it was about that in 4 years' time. My sort of analysis from the tender prices that we've got is actually higher for smaller end of the projects. So if you're just basing your information on something that's been done 5 years ago, you're likely to be 30% out anyway. And the other thing is that if you, as an architect, come up with a budget that's $1 million, and I know the work that your practice does and what it looks like, there is a certain standard and level, and it it probably will be about that. But then if someone must build it for 800,000, that's within 20%. It's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible. It will be a different standard. So maybe there might be a mismatch in expectations, or what you think they want as an architect, or what I understand as a quantity surveyor that the client is looking for, and the understanding of what they want. The local differences, so especially in reference to TV programs and stories from the internet, how much something costed, because the local differences are quite important. It's the cost of resources, labor is one thing, but if you have projects in dense urban areas, the preliminary costs, so everything not associated with building but required, they can be quite high.
Yeah, I mean, it's down to simple things like parking is astronomical, right? You have central London parking prices. In some places you can't put a skip on the road, so you've got grab and go, and all of that. People are quite staggered as to how that adds up quite quickly, right?
We work on projects where just parking suspension was tens of thousands for the duration of project, and it had to be done because they were digging a basement. Yeah, there's no other way. So
there's one in Hammersmith as a specific example. They charge you per sort of vehicle type. And we had a customer say, can't they use more environmentally friendly vehicles to park? And can they just come all in one van? And I'm like, well, your electrician is coming from somewhere. Your general contractor is coming from... It doesn't work like that. And these are just part of building costs. You've got to factor that in. Otherwise, you're... it's a false economy, right?
Yeah. So I think just to step back a little bit, so we've got step one, set the budget, right? Set the budget, and that's on the client. The second one, make sure that it's realistic, whether it's talking to a professional, to architect, or talking to a cost consultant. Most cost consultants will happily chat and just give you a feedback. Is you're there and thereabouts, or
you're miles off.
Miles off. There's no
go and rob the bank. So.
There's no way. There's no way. So most consultants are happy to discuss that. Talk to your builder as well, especially if you've got a reputable one. But do be a little bit wary that maybe a little bit needs to be added on to what they're saying, right?
And then So you've got a budget. How do we design to the budget? And maybe this is a question for me more than you. It's like, clients come with yourself and said, okay, look, actually, we think this is possible for this. Where is it important from a design perspective that you design to that budget? And what can often make that go a little bit pear-shaped? What ends up taking that down a different route? I mean, for me, it's, sometimes the statutory stuff that's imposed on us can often make the budget shift a little bit.
Yeah.
Various changes in regulations, suddenly you've got to do something that's going to be more expensive. Normally that stuff you can foresee happening, particularly in the building regulations. If we know that certain things are going to change dramatically, then we factor that in at early stage, and you'd be doing the same. But where, from a design perspective, does suddenly budget go, oh dear, this isn't quite what we thought it was?
Well, so I would go back to step 1 and 2.
Go
so, once you've got once you know what you want to do, and you've got your budget, and it has been somewhat tested. We're still working with plus minus 25%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the spread is very, very big still. But at this point, you should know, as we use the example, I want we're looking for an additional room and living space and whatnot, and it's likely to be double story extension with a rear extension, and at this point also, especially if you're talking to a good architect, they already should know that we want this glazed wall and whatever. So that already should be set, and then you have budget that actually allows for that.
Yeah.
So how do you design to the budget? You actually design to the brief.
Yeah.
That's already been very early and very vaguely tested.
Yeah.
But that's, I think at this point it's sufficient.
Yeah.
That's enough. And you just need to make sure that you don't end up with was a ridiculous example, but you don't add on things that weren't in
the gold-plated taps.
Yeah, well, yeah, we've seen those. The classic one. I think the classic one. I'm not sure whether you came across that. I've seen it so many times that we do extension. We do this that. Oh, I know what. Actually, we changed that stair as well, because now I want to have a big impact because the
entrance hallway has to be grander, right?
And here's the picture that I like, right? And I would just look at it, well, very good. That's about £100,000, right? And that wasn't in your brief.
Yeah.
So keeping to those boundaries of the brief.
I mean, you didn't guess that I wanted to do that? Like, how did you not know about that?
Well, we would have flagged it in our questionnaire, and you would have said no.
That little crystal ball that you have at the outset, right?
Yeah. But I think for me, that's the design to the budget. But the other important thing is, which I always stress, that we're not there to limit.
That's a good point.
Anyone.
Yeah.
Right? This it's not our role to tell someone what they can or cannot have at their home. Ultimately, the decision lies with the client.
Yeah.
It's just making that decision in an informed way. And if we go back to our £1 million example, if the client really wants those gold tabs or statements there, and they accept that the budget will go up to 1.2 million, and they're happy with that, that's fine.
Yeah.
You revise the brief, you revise the budget, and you move on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really key, isn't it? You revise the brief and you revise the budget.
Yeah, I think so.
You can't afford to necessarily, excuse the pun there, you can't afford to revise the brief and not the budget. And which often people are like, that's kind of squeezing round peg, square hole kind of thing. That
happens
right?
so often.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's important to stress that it's just not a sensible way to go about it.
Yeah. When we come onto projects, we like to start as early as possible, but sometimes we come later on, so towards the tender stage. And it's very often like one of the first questions I ask, what's the budget? And everyone's just looking at each other
nervously.
And they say, well, we were thinking about this. And I say, okay, so when was this discussed and agreed? At the initial meeting with the client, they said they had so much to spend.
Yeah.
Right? And
that was 4 years ago. No.
Hopefully not. We get to the planning episode that might have been 4 years ago, right? But usually 6 months or 2 years. And I'm dead certain that what was discussed at that meeting in terms of the scope of the project is very different from what's prepared for tender, which is normal. That's why you design, right? To find the best solution.
Yeah,
so
it evolves, right?
It evolves. The changes are welcomed. It's keeping them in check with the likely cost of the whole build. It's important.
We talked briefly there kind of about the market fluctuations with kind of labor costs, with material costs. As a designer, should I be considering that, or do I just go like, okay, we've kind of verified this budget, I designed to it? Because I can't predict, and I think the last 5 years have been real testament to that actually and something that I think is often lost, that, what you design today might not be installed, and I think we discussed this previously as well, for another year. Some of the kind of final finishing touches, your costs are a year into the future.
Yeah.
And it only takes one hike in the material cost for something, and suddenly it's like, well, that stair is now,
Yeah. Yeah, it
falls into contingency.
Well, falls into contingency. That's one thing, but I've got a slightly different view on that.
Go on.
I think it's like a pet reason for any contractor to justify increasing cost.
Yeah.
And I hear it all the time, and it's not always true.
Yeah, I agree.
So
you've got to shake it out a little bit, right?
Yeah, we can only sort of assume so much, right?
Yeah.
Fortunately, we hear talking about residential projects, right? They, most of them don't take that longer time, right? I think I don't know what's your experience, but for me, sort of start to finish, a project about 2-3 million, about 3 to 4 years. Yeah, from start to finish. But by the time you're getting towards the tender, that's already a year gone at least. Your year passed anyway, and then hopefully you lock in contractor into a fixed price.
Yeah.
So that period of uncertainty is usually about a year, right? So how do you deal with that? I'll be wrong on the number now because I haven't actually checked it before. But we've got. I like
that deep breath. I'll be.
Well, I'm supposed to be the money man, but I've got my resources. I don't remember all the numbers off top of my head. But the inflation, whereas over the last 5 years, been closer to 30%.
Yeah.
The last year has been like between 3 and 5, and someone will correct me on that, or we actually check it and put it in writing what it has been. And
it's a consistently fluctuating number, right?
Well, it's quite stable actually if you look at it. There was one outlier though, and that's the outlier that no one could have predicted, was I think towards the end of the COVID and right after, prices have gone up by over 20% in a year, and they fluctuated greatly. So no one could have predicted it, and I don't think we can. But if you look at the
wider picture,
the wider picture over the last 20, 30 years, it's
just steady incremental.
Yeah, it's fairly consistent, and also. We talked about the early budget, right? So that's one thing I'd like to mention. What happens afterwards in terms of being more precise, but at both of those stages, we're still talking about round numbers.
Yeah,
round numbers. So does 5% make much difference? No, it doesn't. The other thing is when you finally go to tender, you get quotes from contractors. in my opinion, it's normal to have 10% in between difference between contractors. That's like expected. It's just comes from the efficiencies, the way they run sites, the way
it's their overheads essentially, right?
The overheads, but the supply chains that they use and so on. 10% is normal.
Yeah.
So where does this 3 or 4% sit in early budgeting? It's not the accuracy that we're really looking for. But I think we skipped one thing. It's so what happens? So when you've got your early budget and it's a ballpark figure, what happens next? So once the feasibility is completed, feasibility design, you sometimes might have 1-2 different options. You as a client don't know what to choose, and you as an architect want some guidance. There's a very useful tool. Technically, it's called elemental cost plan, and it's where cost consultants and quantity surveyors break down projects not into every minute detail that comes later, but into elements of the build.
Got it.
And so what we do is we've got foundations, and at this stage, we quite often we don't have the detailed design for them, but we know that it will be this type of foundation.
You've got experience,
likely.
Right?
Well, we talk to designers as well, right? Yeah. So if you come with a project to us, as you have, work on a few together, we will talk about it. Okay, is there an engineer? Okay, we start talking to engineer because quite often they're not appointed yet, right? So we started talking. Okay, well, let's have a quick chat and say what foundations are we likely? What type of foundations are we likely to have? What type of external walls we're likely to have? By this time, we know that the door, the glazed wall at the back will be about this size roof. At this point, you also know that maybe client would like to have a green roof, and they may have a roof light, and they want this in the loft, and they want the statement stair, right? So we start breaking out those that rough budget into elements and getting more and more precise as the design progresses, and the rates that we use for that, they still allow for that uncertainty of the exact solution. But if we're narrowing that uncertainty down, and often what happens is you have one cost plan prepared that it's into elements, but a little bit vaguish. And then the client is reassured, okay, well, that's going in the right direction. Or sometimes that's done for 2 or 3 options, right? And say, okay, well, we'll go with this one. And then architect design that option in more detail, and that's getting reviewed. So more detail is added to the cost plan, and that uncertainty is getting smaller and smaller.
This is about sort of managing that risk, isn't it, then?
That's about managing the risk. And sometimes there's quite a few of those reiterations, or other times it's 1, 2, 3, and that's sufficient. It depends on the complexity of the project.
And so typically in that instance, and this is a deep dive into kind of the procedure working, and everybody will work slightly differently. Somebody, if they wanted to approach you, they kind of have multiple steps in the process where they dip into your services, or would you be continuously engaged start to finish, or does it just depends on the project?
Okay, so that's about how we do it. I think we said podcast is
quite general, but to give people a sense of how people may approach that, right?
I think it needs to be in whoever does it. It needs to be relative to the complexity and the size of the project. If on smaller projects, I would say, having 1 or 2 checkpoints in the way as the design progresses, it's sufficient, and especially if they're not very complex projects, it's there's no need to do it more often,
overdo it, right?
Or to overdo it. But on projects that are more complex and larger, once the risk of overrun is much much bigger, or the effect of that risk, if it happens, it's much larger. So it makes more sense to check it more often, more thoroughly.
Yeah.
And the solutions may be more complex, and you may be considering more different options.
Okay.
As I think, as we said before, there is a difference in the design process if you're designing something to 150,000 budget and to 2.5 million.
Yeah.
Right. Nothing wrong with smaller jobs, but it needs to be the services.
Right?
They need to be proportionate to the size of the project. Yeah.
So we've kind of shaken it up a little bit in terms of refining the cost plan at the design stage, and once there's a little bit more design, you've kind of looked at your cost plan again. Then what happens when we then start looking at it and budgeting at procurement stage? Are we there yet, or do we have another stage in between?
Well, so I think we, at that point there is a final check. There is a final check that I always recommend. So as the design is completed, so your technical design stage 4, for those who know the jargon, right? It's as that's completed. We can't do cost plans anymore because there is too much detail actually.
Yeah.
That cost plans, just the rates using cost plans, can't cover. So then before you go to tender, or before you ask for quotes to contractors, you need to prepare the tender documentation for them to price, right? Whether it's architect preparing that or quantity surveyor, doesn't really matter. But someone has to write a pricing document, whichever form it is in. And we can discuss it in more detail at some other point. Like technicalities was better for which project, but when the pricing document is written for smaller projects, it's maybe schedule of works typically. I would say that as the sort of final sanity check, and also to aid assessment of the quotes from contractors, is to get that priced. Typically will be priced by quantity surveyor. Right? That's gonna cost the client, maybe a couple of £1,000, depending on size of the project, maybe a little bit less, but not that much less, or a bit more if it's a complex, large project. But I think that it's like one of the most valuable exercises one can do, because what happens is what the surveyor would take that documentation, will price it. So when they actually pricing it, they also have to ensure that all the documents they're not missing any information, or don't have any discrepancies. And also in that exercise, any unclear items are flashed out. They get flashed out. So if a QS can price the job as a fixed price, the contractor should be able to do it. And if a QS,
it's like a sense check, then
it's a sense check. It is a sense check, and then a QS will come back with the cost that what they think the contractors are likely, or the figure that they're gonna likely price it at. But this is priced per item. And it should be very detailed. So it's almost the final check. And we've been in that situation. We've been in the situation that we did that exercise, and then we went to tender, and all the quotes were considerably higher. It's always a little bit nervous moment, especially if you advise at the early stage and you continue that advice and you go to tender and then you get quotes at 20.
And where is it better to be, slightly higher, or actually if you've been over sort of conservative and slightly?
Oh, it's better to be spot on.
Wow,
that's what's better. But now the way I look at it, we just calculate it as the best we can with our best assumptions, and what comes out, it comes out.
Yeah.
And that stays. Because
Don't get emotionally attached to it, essentially.
No,
right?
if you start thinking about, I'll overprice it a little bit so I'm not off, well, that means that you don't know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
First of all.
True.
Or you maybe start thinking, I'll underprice it so the client's not upset.
Yeah.
You're also shooting yourself in the knee. So I think it's...
Just being honest is where I'm landing.
It's just being honest. But on that particular occasion, it did happen, and the client wasn't happy. I don't think she had a great opinion of me at that point. But we stood by it.
You're not there to be everyone's friend, right?
No, but we stood by it, and I actually said, okay, we'll go to tender again.
Yeah.
I think the problem was the selection of those contractors.
There's a whole episode on that stuff,
There's
right?
a whole episode on that. I think the problem was the selection of the contractor. I think our benchmark pricing is correct.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the next tender, we got two contractors that were very close to what we thought it should be.
Wow.
One was the project was about 900,000. One was like 850.
Right.
So
within those tolerances that we spoke about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that sort of portrays that what would have happened if we didn't do that benchmark pricing. Right, and
You'd
the previous quotes were 1.2 million, 1.4 million. That
you sold your value there at that little point. There,
it's not about money. It's the value of the process. It's the value of the process.
That's what I mean. As in the value of having the cost consultant on your side at the outset. That is the key here, right? Because often people dismiss it as an unnecessary element to the process. But wow.
You're having those conversations. I don't get that.
Yeah, they're talking to you by then, right?
Yeah, they're not talking to you by then. No, but it is. It's it caused friction.
Yeah.
Because there was a little bit like you thought it would be about 900,000, and we got quotes over 1.2 and more. And if we didn't do that exercise, I guess the client would choose 1.2.
Yeah. And I think it also goes back to that point that you made earlier, right? Ultimately, the contractor is in the game to make money.
Yes. Yeah.
And if he thinks there is an opportunity, and I say he, but if they think there is an opportunity to make more, why not, right?
Yeah.
It's a commercial, again, we talk about business case for the client, but there is a business case for a contractor.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Everybody's
in business
charity,
for a reason, right?
They're not charity, and you can't expect them to be. They dare to make money.
Right. And I think sometimes that's forgotten in the process that is, everybody is there for commercial reasons.
Yeah.
But so that's an interesting...
Yeah.
£300,000 saving, right?
300,000, yeah. But then there is another thing is at this stage what I think is really important, and it is part. I'm not sure whether it's always considered part of cost planning, but it's important. Is the quality of the project documentation or project documentation, specification designs, and contract documentation that is provided to contractors at the tender stage. Yeah. And I can't stress it highly enough how important it is that this package, the design package and the specifications is of good quality. Yeah. Because when it comes to building, you get delays if you don't have the right information on time, and ideally it is a tender, you get delays, and you get claims for extra money for variations, right? And most of those claims can be tracked to poor documentation at the tender. So,
and I think there's the flip side to that as well, that actually when a contractor receives a poor tender package, it's almost like, right, I'm game here, right? And I put it in a really contentious way intentionally, because actually it's an opportunity. Again, it's a kind of...
I have to say you've got quite
I've come out on the wrong side today, haven't I?
you've got quite a specific view of contractors.
They're not all like that.
They're not all like that. I just wanted to point out that I know many really
reputable
good ones, reputable,
so with
a lot of integrity, right?
Yeah.
But actually, if you put yourself in their shoes, right?
They're pricing risk.
The pricing risk is one thing, but first of all, their job is to win the project, right? If you're the architect and there is a client and you bring, a rubbish tender documentation, they're not going to tell you that.
Yeah.
They don't want to upset you, right?
Yeah.
They may tell you their mates or talk about it in the office, but they will price what you give them. What you give them. If conversely, if the client puts some requirements on them that are completely unreasonable, like start within a week, they will in most cases they will play ball. They will try to comply because they want to win the project. They don't want to upset anyone. And I also noticed that most contractors, they're like optimistic bunch, right?
You'd have to be in that game.
I think you have to be in that game, yeah. So
you price for 10 jobs and you hope for one, right?
Well, not even that, but it's like, I see it so often that there's a problem and they go like, yeah, we'll do it. We resolve it, right? And which is good. That's what you want, because you want someone who actually wants to solve problems, not create them. But they're not always successful, and things catch up with them. Yeah. So there is that. But you're right. It's the better information you give to them, the easier it is for them to price it, and then deliver the project, right? And so I think that's important. And once that's done, actually, in ideal world. I've been there a couple of times, but in an ideal world where everything's clear or there's only few remaining items that need to be clarified during construction and all the information is provided on time and there is no changes to the scope of the project, there's no reason to go over budget.
Yeah.
Right? If you allowed for everything, you specified everything in the tender documentation, the only reason for the contractor to be able to claim extra money is change.
Yeah. And so it goes back to, if you make as many decisions as early as possible and spend that time doing that, it can allow for an amazingly smooth build, right? Yes.
And also, many contractors will love you.
Yeah.
Because
it makes their life easier.
All they want is that to have all the information they need on time
at the beginning
and just run with it.
Yeah.
And just run with it.
Yeah, because particularly on that point that you made about, they've got their different margins. The good ones, they're working really sharp. They want to, they've programmed in their mind, okay, this is my project.
Yeah.
I've done loads like this. If I put this team in on this date and this team on that date, where it all falls apart is when those efficiencies are lost for them.
Yeah.
And you frustrate the process and suddenly the build is that much longer as a result.
And they don't make money, but sitting around waiting for information or for confirmation, they don't make money like that. Yeah. Even if they charge you extra for preliminaries, standing time or whatnot, this is not how a contractor makes money.
No.
They make money by working efficiently and completing, hopefully earlier than they planned, because they keep all those costs that they would have spent otherwise. If they can finish a month earlier, that's on a £3 million job. If they finish a month earlier, that's, I'm guessing, £150,000 in extra profit.
Yeah,
right.
It's big, isn't
Everyone
it?
likes it.
Yeah. It's in their interest to do so, and good ones will work on that basis. We'll talk about the good ones.
But we still need to watch them during construction, right? So
go on, clarify why. I'll give you my take from my devil builders.
I can imagine what it's going to be. We just as architect or QS, it really doesn't matter, because we fulfill the same role. It's just making sure that they do what they do for the money that they promise they will do it. So hopefully, if at the tender everything's been done correctly, there are not many grounds for claims of extra cost, for variations. Hopefully there are no changes, so those variations should be really non-existent or really minimized. And then it comes to certifying payments to contractors, which probably it's a good idea to do a very specific specialist episode on that. But because I believe in that collaborative way of delivering projects, I think it's important for everyone to understand the pressure on the cash flow pressure on contractors. If, say, for quick calculation, if you have a project that's $1 million. No, it won't be that quick. But okay, there are £1 million in construction.
There, right? 12 months.
Say £1 million in construction, and say it's 15 months, which is about what it would be, right? So, on the standard JCT terms, which we talk about JCT, we've got that in another project, in another episode. That's a running bill. If you just do a rough calculation, divided by 15 is just over £60,000 a month. They usually get paid about 2 months after starting of the payment period. So they need to cover £120,000 to be able to deliver it efficiently. So when we certify the payments, there is a balancing act of making sure that the contractor is paid fairly, but it's not overpaid, because there is a big risk that if anything goes wrong, obviously the client will suffer. So certification of payments against the work that has been carried out, it's a massive,
I see it as one of the most important roles of whoever is undertaking that
whoever
process.
is undertaking it. So that's
the difference between a contractor surviving till the end of the project in some instances.
Well, if
it shouldn't be, but
it could be,
two or three contracts where it goes a little bit pear-shaped, and suddenly you haven't got a contractor at the end.
Yes, but then on the other hand, it's a different episode material.
Completely.
But on the other hand, if you can't, they can't be using your project to prop up other ones, which is not unheard of. Well, so we went through pretty much all the project phases. So, but there's one more left.
Go on.
Well, what happens after? And I think that's more for you to talk about than me, because we quite often, we settle the final account, so we just close all the books and make sure that everything has been paid in accordance with the contract, and there's been no overpayments and so on. However, there's something for the designers to think of, right?
And you're kind of thinking at the outset about what it's going to cost you to run the building, but you only know that when you start running the building, right? So what can you do to make it a little bit more thermally efficient, so your electric bills are lower, or whatever it is that is your driver.
Maintenance,
all of those things, right? It's like a massive long list that is an ongoing operational cost to a building. And I think people often think, well, I've done my building, I'm never going to have to touch it for 10 years. And I'm like, well, that's a false kind of, you always have to maintain buildings. They never stay exactly like that. Even if they're done up to the best standard, there is ongoing annual maintenance, and all of that can be designed in at the outset.
How often do you have those conversations? And I'm not sure whether we made it quite clear. What we're talking about is actually making design decisions earlier in the process that affect the ongoing cost of running the building rather than just construction costs, right?
I think we try and navigate those conversations as early as possible, quite often at the kind of developing the brief stage, and some of that can come from, what type of energy they're looking to provide in the house, whether it's air source heat pumps or conventional boilers, etc. But a lot of it is kind of like, how are you proposing to live, and what are the kind of end outcomes of this? And some things you just won't be able to avoid. So, for example, full glass roofs, right? Okay, somehow we've got to maintain these things. Self-cleaning glass only works so far.
Yeah.
But if you have a full glass roof and then a gutter directly above it on the main roof, well, to clean that gutter every so often, you're going to need to do some quite complicated. You're not going to just prop up a ladder because it's just not going to be possible. And when you start telling people that, they're like, oh, we thought it would still be the same as how it was. So it's kind of helping people to navigate that. And I think it's important to do that as early as possible so they go in with their eyes wide open as to what this operational cost is going to be. But equally, we've had so many stories where people were never told that that would be the case. And suddenly they're like, oh, and now it costs us this much more to run, whether that be in heating or in any form. For me, it's this one, like, people putting electric underfloor heating on the whole of a ground floor. It just feels like, why would you do that? Like, who told you that was a good idea?
Or a big glazed roof and then retrofitting air condionding because it gets too hot, right?
Right, yeah. And it's like, well, surely you knew that was going to happen, right? You created a little greenhouse for yourself. But you can design out the problems, but you have to be aware of the potential pitfalls. And I think that goes back to, really having very open dialogue with the design team at the outset to help navigate that.
Yeah. So I would say that what comes to my mind is probably would be good if clients had a checklist of what to look at different stages, which...
maybe we can provide that in the notes.
Maybe we can think about it. Is there anything else you wanted to add on?
I was going to say, I don't think there is. I think we've kind of taken budget and cost control through the process of a build.
I think so. I think it was high level as well. So if anyone wants to point out what we missed, absolutely
we'll do a little edit.
Books have been written on that, but I think
enough to give people a steer if they're starting their project.
I think so. We definitely. I think it will be interesting to get back to those maybe
more
specific
small points
and specifics later on with some guests.
Perfect.
And I find it really interesting.
Actually. Of course. Of course. Thanks for listening to the Home Project podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and stay tuned for further episodes where you'll be able to learn a little bit more about how you can avoid a horror build.
Make sure that you like and subscribe the podcast on the platform of your choosing. And with the launch, for the first 25 people who subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review, we offer a free 30-minute consultation with either Tina as an architect or myself as a quantity surveyor, where you can ask us questions about your project and we'll try to put you on the right path.